Hi, this is Dr. Mercola, and I'm joined today by Barbara Lowe Fisher, who is the founder of the Vaccine Information Center, and she's been a leader and a pioneer in educating people about the concerns of vaccine safety and freedom of choice in the vaccine area, and really has been recognized for her leadership and appointed to several government committees as the consumer representative because she's had such a major leadership role in this area. And we're here today to talk about a concern that we have about yet another vaccine that's being seriously considered as being recommended on a regular basis for really very little benefit as far as we can see, and we'll get into the specifics, but that's the meningococcal vaccine for meningitis. And Barbara has really just come back recently from a committee, a government committee that
there was a stakeholder engagement meeting where vaccine stakeholders came together to talk about.
Was it sponsored by the government?
Sponsored by the Centers for Disease Control, yes.
Okay.
And
you were one of the lone representatives of the movement that expresses our concerns about vaccine safety, and really, do the risk outweigh any benefit, which is really the central element here, and something that every individual, we hope, will have the opportunity to make that choice for themselves, not be told by some government agency that's heavily influenced by conflict of interest and lobbied efforts by drug companies to make that choice for you.
Well, I think that with this vaccine, which is already recommended for kids 11 to 12 years old, as well as 16 years old now, as well as college freshmen. It started out with college freshmen. They want to add anywhere from 3 to 4 more doses at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, at 12 months of age of this meningococcal vaccine.
Well, before we go into that, why don't we just go back a little bit further about the way it's currently being implemented, and what is meningitis, and why is it being recommended, and how many people are affected? Because traditionally, it's been, as a physician, you know, my experience is this is the disease that many college freshmen get when they go away to school and live in a dormitory and come down with this disease, and there may be minor epidemics, little outbreaks in certain areas in colleges as a result of that.
Yeah. Well, meningitis is an inflammation of the meninges of the brain. It's basically a brain inflammation. And the Neisseria meningococcal is
it can cause a variety of infections and other things that aren't infections. But we're concerned about the
Neisseria meningococcal, but there are other kinds of organisms like pneumococcal and Haemophilus influenza B also cause meningitis, inflammation of the brain. But it's interesting because vaccination from the very first vaccines, smallpox and rabies vaccines, also can cause inflammation of the brain in rare cases. So you kind of have an interesting situation here where the meningitis, the meningococcal disease, causes the same type of complications as the vaccine, and we can go over some of the signs of a brain inflammation later. But here's the situation with this vaccine. Neisseria meningococcal is only associated with about 1,400 to 3,000 cases in the whole United States every year out of 308 million Americans. There are 5 strains. There are strain A, B, C, Y, and W135. A third to half of the cases of Neisseria meningococcal disease is caused by strain B. That strain is not in the vaccine.
So that's the predominant strain.
Well, it's certainly in children under 5 years of age. About 66 to 70% of the cases are caused by strain B.
2/3. And this is the target age group that's being considered for this new vaccine recommendation.
It's actually children under 1. Let's look at the death rate for Neisseria meningococcal disease. Between the years 2001 and 2010, that's 9 years, you had in the children under age 1, you had 16 deaths.
The whole 10-year period?
In the whole 9-year period.
9-year period, okay.
16 deaths in children under 1 from this meningococcal infection. And you had 11 of those cases were type B. So 11 out of the 16 deaths, which were caused by Neisseria meningococcal disease in children under 1 between 2001 and 2010, were type B. That's not in the vaccine. So here we have a policy that's proposed that you have every child at 2, 4, 6 months, and 12 months, at 11 to 12 years of age, and at 16 years of age, that's 6 doses, get meningococcal vaccine that doesn't cover the 30 to 50% or 70% for the small children of the disease. And so you really have to take a look at the cost-benefit analysis, as well as you have to look at the insertion of another vaccine into a schedule that already at 2, 4, and 6 months has 8 vaccines given on each of the days that are at 2, 4, and 6 months. That's 9 vaccines now. They're going to be given at 2, 4, and 6 months and potentially 12 months. That's a lot. I mean, where are the studies to show?
There aren't.
There aren't.
There aren't studies. But just even look at now, we would never dispute that the tragedy of a child under 1 coming down with meningitis. I mean, that should be avoided in any way, shape,
it's a horrendous disease.
But the recommendation for this is to implement a vaccine for every child. And on the numbers you quoted, the last 10 years in the United States, there was on average, there was 16 children.
There were 16
over 9 years, and 11 of those were not covered by this vaccine, clearly not covered. So that's 5 over essentially 10 years. Way less than 1 child per year would be saved from death. Now, clearly more would be saved from potentially saved from this infection, but they're not going to die. I mean, less than 1 child a year. That's death. It's a half a child a year over 10, essentially averaged out. When there are 106,000 people who die every year, year after year, 106,000 from taking properly prescribed prescription drugs. Why aren't they doing something about those prescription drugs when they're worried about less than half of 1 child per year? It just does. It's not rational. It is absolutely irrational unless your primary justification for this is a financial one for the drug companies.
Well, I think that the vaccine should be available for anyone who wants to use it. But the issue I have with a universal use recommendation by CDC for meningococcal vaccine for these children under 1 is that every time the CDC recommends a vaccine for universal use for children, in the last quarter century, almost all of those vaccines have turned into mandates, state mandates, meaning that we don't have a choice. And that's really, I think, the overarching issue that is becoming really a point of a lot of anxiety for parents, is that it's not that the vaccines are being recommended. Mm-hmm. It's the vaccines are being mandated. They're being forced. And when anyone tries to make an educated voluntary decision, they are thrown out of a doctor's office. They are harassed. They're threatened.
Well, that's not necessarily even thrown out, but in many cases, many pediatricians, and that's fine. I'm a firm believer in freedom of choice, and I'm not faulting the pediatrician, but they will tell them they will not be seen by them anymore. They have to find a new doctor.
Right. They won't.
Which could be potentially inconvenient, depending on what their health care coverage is.
Well, I mean, it's a situation that is becoming very explosive. Mm-hmm. And so if you take an objective look at this potential recommendation, universal use recommendation by CDC for this vaccine, mm-hmm. you have a couple of issues. You have a cost issue.
What is the typical cost of the series?
I think that the vaccine is, it depends upon if you get it in a public health clinic mm-hmm. or you get it in a private pediatrician's office. But we're looking at probably a lot of pediatricians about $100 a dose.
A dose?
Anywhere $60 to $100 a dose.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
I want to make sure I'm correct on that, but I think that's around the price.
Wow. So hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, I mean,
unless you're being subsidized by the government, and if it isn't a public health clinic, it's not that, well, the person's not going to pay for it, but eventually we all pay for it because it's
right.
paid for by the government, which is only either prints the money or takes it from taxes.
Right, right, no question. The vaccines that are provided in the public health clinics for a very reduced cost or no cost are subsidized by the taxpayer. Yeah. So, I mean, we're looking at a vaccine that'll be 6 doses, basically. It'll be 2, 4, 6 months, 12 months, 11 to 12 years old, and 16 years old. And if you haven't gotten, I guess, at freshman year, because Texas just made a mandate for meningococcal vaccine for freshmen, college students. Now, Texas has a conscientious belief exemption due to the amazing work of Don Richardson, who's now MVIC's Director of Advocacy. And by the way, everyone should sign up for MVIC's advocacy portal at mvicadvocacy.org, because we are trying to protect the exemptions in the state. And certainly, if this vaccine becomes universal use vaccine, there will probably be states that will mandate it. And so it's important for us to protect these vaccine
Yeah, there should
exemptions.
be a link for that below here. So definitely, if you're not involved with that already, I would strongly encourage you to sign up for that, because we can collectively make a huge difference in this. And we have. I mean, Dawn Richardson's efforts in Texas are a great example of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about protecting our right to choose. That is, if a mother wants to give her children, say there's been meningococcal disease in the family, and the mother believes that her child may be at risk for meningococcal disease, certainly she should have the right to have access to a vaccine. But we should not be forced to use a vaccine that we do not believe is either safe, effective, or necessary for our children. We need to have that right, and I am very concerned about this proposed policy, and that's why we have put out information that the CDC, and I have to give props to the CDC on this, they are holding public engagement meetings in cities. There's going to be a meeting in Denver, in Chicago, and in Seattle, and they've already held one in New Hampshire. But to get input from the public about what the public thinks about the addition of this meningococcal vaccine to the under 1 year old recommended schedule. And I hope everyone weighs in. And if they can't get there to the meetings, that they will write to the CDC.
And we'll have information for you also on how you can voice your concerns and your opinions to the CDC directly and let them know what you think and feel about this issue.
Yes. Because again, it's one thing to make the vaccine available, it's quite another thing to recommend it for every child and then force it.